Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Saturday, March 8th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside will be mild today with a high of 67.9 degrees and a low of 42.9, so you might want to bring a light jacket if you're heading out. Coming up on today's show, we'll examine the partisan divide in Congress as Republicans pursue a government funding strategy that excludes Democratic input. We'll also analyze how former President Trump's economic policies might be steering the country toward a potential recession. Plus, we'll explore the fascinating intersection of technology and faith, looking at how artificial intelligence is transforming religious services and the boundaries religious leaders are establishing. All this and more on Alex's News. We're now turning to a developing story on Capitol Hill, where lawmakers are racing against the clock to avoid a government shutdown. With just 6 days until the March 14th deadline, House Republicans are taking an unusual approach to government funding. Joining us with the details is our congressional correspondent, Ethan. Good morning, Ethan. What can you tell us about this Republican strategy?
Good morning, Grace. According to reporting from U.S. News and World Report, House Republicans are attempting something quite rare in Washington these days, trying to pass government funding legislation without any Democratic support. Speaker Mike Johnson is proposing what's called a continuing resolution, or CR, which would maintain federal agencies at current 2024 funding levels through September 30th, the end of the fiscal year. What makes this particularly notable is that former President Trump is backing this approach, with Republicans hoping to pass it in the House and then essentially dare Senate Democrats to oppose it.
That sounds like a high-stakes gamble. How realistic is this strategy given the current makeup of Congress?
It's extremely challenging, Grace. Republicans have only a narrow majority in the House, meaning they can afford very few defections from their own party. And even if they manage to pass it there, the Senate presents an even bigger hurdle. Due to Senate rules, they would need at least 60 votes to overcome a potential filibuster. That means convincing at least 8 Democrats to support their plan. Traditionally, spending bills require bipartisan support precisely because of these mathematical realities.
I understand there's also controversy surrounding something called DOGE. Can you explain what that is and how it factors into this funding debate?
Yes, DOGE stands for the Department of Government Efficiency. It was established by the Trump administration on January 20th of this year through an executive order. Essentially, it renamed the United States Digital Service to the U.S. DOGE Service and created a temporary organization within it. While President Trump has publicly described Elon Musk as heading DOG, the White House has clarified that Musk is actually a non-career special government employee without formal authority to make government decisions.
So what exactly is DOGE's role in all this?
That's precisely what's causing controversy. Despite the White House's official position on Musk's role, he has reportedly sent associates to examine various government agencies with the goal of identifying waste and fraud. According to recent reports, the EPA now requires DOGE approval for spending items over $50,000, which has raised serious legal questions. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse and others have argued these orders may exceed presidential authority, since the Constitution gives Congress the responsibility for authorizing and appropriating funds.
How are Democrats responding to this Republican funding proposal?
They're firmly opposed. Senator Patty Murray has specifically expressed concern that this approach would allow Elon Musk to cut programs that families rely on, directly referencing Musk's role with DOGE. Meanwhile, House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries has called it a partisan continuing resolution that threatens funding for key programs. Democrats acknowledge the Republican majority's responsibility to govern, but are emphasizing the need for a bipartisan solution rather than this go-it-alone approach.
If lawmakers can't reach an agreement by March 14th, what would a government shutdown mean for Americans?
The impact would be significant. Hundreds of thousands of federal workers would be affected, with many facing furloughs or delayed paychecks. While essential services would continue to operate, many government functions would be disrupted. That's why there are ongoing negotiations for a broader agreement on spending levels as a potential backup plan, though the path to agreement remains unclear as we get closer to that deadline, just 6 days away.
Thank you, Ethan, for that comprehensive breakdown of this complex situation. We'll be keeping a close eye on developments as that March 14th deadline approaches. In our second story today, we're looking at growing economic concerns as President Trump's second-term policies take effect. Joining us to break down the latest economic indicators is our financial reporter, Chloe Bennett. Chloe, there seems to be mounting worry about the direction of the economy under these new policies.
That's right, Grace. According to multiple news sources, as of today, March 8, 2025, there's increasing concern that President Trump's economic policies, specifically his tariffs, government layoffs, and spending freeze may be negatively impacting the U.S. economy.
Let's start with the current state of the job market. How are things looking there?
U.S. News and World Report, citing the Associated Press, indicates that while the labor market appears relatively healthy with a 4.1% unemployment rate, there are several warning signs emerging. We're seeing an increase in involuntary part-time worker PORSA. These are people who want full-time work but can only find part-time position, and notable job losses in the leisure and hospitality sectors.
What about other economic indicators? Are they also showing signs of trouble?
According to Federal Reserve data reported by Perplexity, the Economic Policy Uncertainty Index has spiked to 318.75. To put that in context for viewers, while this is lower than the record high of 1,026.38 reached in January 2024, it still reflects significant economic uncertainty and signals a potential recession risk. WNKY News 40 television also reports concerning indicators including federal government payroll reductions and a stock market sell-off that suggests investor anxiety.
A lot of attention has been focused on the president's tariff policies. How are those playing out?
That's a central concern, Grace. According to WRAL News and U.S. News and World Report, President Trump has instigated trade wars with Canada, Mexico, and China, with further tariffs planned for Europe. This is potentially causing conflict with key allies. Perplexity reports that specific sectors are feeling particular strain. The agricultural sector has been hit by China's retaliatory measures, targeting over $20 billion in agricultural markets. The automotive industry remains vulnerable despite temporary exemptions for auto-related goods from Mexico and Canada.
How is the White House responding to these concerns?
The administration is standing firm. U.S. News and World Report notes that President Trump defends his policies, stating that any financial pain from tariffs is a temporary disruption that will lead to stronger growth and the return of manufacturing jobs to the U.S. The White House maintains these measures will ultimately benefit American workers. However, economists warn that tariffs could lead to job losses, lower wages, and higher inflation. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell has noted that tariffs of this magnitude are likely to raise prices, contributing to inflationary pressures.
There's also been news about government workforce reductions. How significant are those?
WNKY News 40 reports that the Trump administration's efforts to downsize the federal workforce through the Department of Government Efficiency, led by Elon Musk, could further impact future jobs reports. According to WRAL News, these cuts are affecting education, with Wake County schools implementing a hiring freeze, and scientific research, with scientists protesting federal funding cuts.
What's the overall economic outlook at this point?
It's mixed, Grace. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent sees positive momentum in combating inflation, but acknowledges that the U.S. economy has become overly reliant on government deficits, according to U.S. News and World Report. The Federal Reserve's Beige Book reflects heightened economic uncertainty and concerns about tariffs among businesses. Perplexity reports that consumer confidence is dropping due to concerns over higher prices and economic instability, which can further dampen economic growth.
Thank you, Chloe, for that comprehensive look at the current economic situation. It seems like economists, businesses, and consumers will be watching these developments closely in the coming months.
Absolutely, Grace. The big question remains whether these policies will deliver the long-term gains the administration promises or push us toward a more significant economic downturn.
Thanks again for your reporting, Chloe. We'll be right back with our third story after this short break. Here are some other headlines. North Korea has unveiled its first nuclear-powered submarine, described as a nuclear-powered, strategic guided missile submarine. Kim Jong-un personally visited the shipyards, where the 6,000 to 7,000-ton vessel was constructed. The submarine is expected to carry about 10 nuclear-capable missiles, significantly enhancing North Korea's ability to launch weapons from underwater without detection. Experts question how the heavily sanctioned nation acquired the necessary resources and technology, with speculation about possible Russian assistance in exchange for military support in Ukraine. The submarine could begin testing within 1 to 2 years before actual deployment. Muslim nations have strongly rejected U.S. President Donald Trump's proposal to resettle Gaza's Palestinian population elsewhere. Foreign ministers from the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, representing 57 predominantly Muslim nations, condemned the plan as ethnic cleansing and a crime against humanity during a special session in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Instead, they supported an Egyptian-backed plan to rebuild Gaza under Palestinian Authority administration. Both Israel and the U.S. have rejected this alternative, with Israel viewing the Palestinian Authority as ineffective and the U.S. maintaining that Gaza is currently uninhabitable due to destruction. China has announced retaliatory tariffs on Canadian farm and food products, set to take effect March 20, 2025. The measures include a 100% tariff on Canadian rapeseed oil cakes and peas, plus a 25% tariff on Canadian aquatic products and pork. This action follows Canada's October decision to impose a 100% surtax on Chinese-made electric vehicles and a 25% tariff on Chinese steel and aluminum imports. China claims an anti-discrimination probe found that Canada's measures disrupted normal trade and harmed Chinese enterprises. The escalation adds to already heightened global trade tensions involving the U.S., China, Canada, and Mexico. Louisiana death row inmate Jesse Hoffman Jr. has filed a federal lawsuit challenging his scheduled March 18 execution by nitrogen hypoxia. Hoffman, sentenced for the 1996 execution-style murder of advertising executive Mary Molly Elliott, argues the method constitutes cruel and unusual punishment and infringes on his right to practice Buddhism during execution. His attorneys cite Alabama's use of nitrogen hypoxia, which resulted in visible signs of distress in previous executions. Louisiana officials support the method, emphasizing the need to deliver justice after a 15-year execution hiatus. One person has died, and several others were injured as Tropical Cyclone Alfred, which weakened to a tropical low, tracked across Australia's east coast. A 61-year-old man's body was recovered from a flooded river near Dorrigo in New South Wales. The storm caused Queensland's largest blackout in history, leaving 330,000 homes and businesses without power, while 45,000 premises lost electricity in New South Wales. An apartment building on the Gold Coast lost its roof, and a couple sustained minor injuries when a tree crashed through their bedroom ceiling. Emergency teams conducted 36 flood rescues as rivers in both states experienced significant flooding. In our third story today, we turn to a fascinating intersection of technology and religion. A Lutheran church in Helsinki, Finland, has conducted what might be the first church service created almost entirely by artificial intelligence. Joining us to discuss this unique experiment is our technology and culture reporter, Ethan. Good morning, Ethan.
Good morning, Grace. Yes, this is quite the innovative religious experiment. According to reporting from the New York Post and Hindustan Times, St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Helsinki just conducted a groundbreaking service where nearly everything was generated by AI, from the sermon and prayers to the music and even visual elements.
That's remarkable. What exactly did this AI-generated service look like?
It was quite elaborate. The AI system created digital avatars of Jesus, Satan, the church's pastors, and surprisingly, even a former Finnish president who appeared reading from the Old Testament. The technology wrote the sermon, composed organ music and hymns, and even created a dialogue between Jesus and Satan as part of the service. As the Hindustan Times reported, this experiment was inspired by similar initiatives that have taken place in Germany and Switzerland.
I'm curious, was everything handled by AI, or were there elements that remained in human hands?
That's an important distinction, Grace. While AI composed the music, Humans still sang the hymns and played the organ. More significantly, the church deliberately excluded AI from certain sacred functions. According to both news sources, the technology was not permitted to offer absolution, forgive sins, or administer the Eucharist, elements considered too deeply personal and sacred to delegate to artificial intelligence. Human clergy were present throughout and led discussions afterward.
How did the congregation respond to this unusual service?
The New York Post reported that reactions were mixed. The service actually drew a larger crowd than usual, with many finding it entertaining and novel. However, both clergy and worshipers noted that the experience lacked the personal connection and spiritual depth of a human-led service. The AI-generated content, while technically impressive, couldn't replicate the emotional resonance and empathetic understanding that human pastors bring to their congregations.
Were there specific limitations they identified with the AI's performance?
Absolutely. 4 key limitations emerged. First was the AI's lack of empathy, as it simply couldn't provide meaningful spiritual guidance. Second, there was a heavy dependence on human oversight, as the AI often relied on stereotypes and missed nuances in religious texts. Third were environmental concerns about the resources required to power such systems. And fourth, while the AI music was described as catchy, it lacked the soul and emotional depth of human performances.
This raises interesting theological questions. How is the Lutheran Church viewing this experiment?
The Hindustan Times noted that this experiment highlighted tensions between Akamai's capacity for personalization and the communal nature of Lutheran worship. While the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Finland hasn't issued an official position on AI-generated religious content following this experiment, their approach appears to be one of cautious exploration rather than endorsement of AI as a substitute for human ministers.
Do you think we'll see more of this type of technology in religious settings?
Despite its limitations, experts quoted in the New York Post suggested AI could enhance certain aspects of church operations, research, bookkeeping, and even assisting with sermon preparation. However, the consensus from this Finnish experiment was clear. While AI may have a supporting role, the human element remains essential for empathy, spiritual guidance, and authentic religious experience. St. Paul's Church intended this as a conversation starter about technology in worship, and in that regard, it certainly succeeded.
A fascinating glimpse into how traditional institutions are experimenting with cutting-edge technology. Thank you, Ethan, for bringing us this story.
You're welcome, Grace. It certainly gives us plenty to contemplate about the future of both technology and faith.
That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Sonnet 3.7, Gemini Flash 2.0, the Perplexity API, and the Google Cloud Text-to-Speech API. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.